Oh goodness gracious me, hey gang. Look what I found, a wonderfully fact-filled booklet, written way back in 1936, an obviously well-schooled archaeologist and anthropologist, who provides a detailed, though potted, in-depth history of the Jewish people. The erudite author provides two titles for this little book. The Ass in the Lion Skin, or, The Jewish Masque. Meaning. In no uncertain terms, masquerade. A few quick juicy excerpts here follow. The Jews, like other childish people, enjoy pretending, and when pretending brings them the tribute due to the character assumed, they revel in it. In this way they have obtained much credit, which should not have been given to them. They were first tricked out in borrowed traditions, and supplied with an entirely false idea of themselves, about 430 BC. Then commenced the great Jewish masque, a pretense which has been maintained to the present day. The masque, naturally, is extremely popular with the Jews. It appeals to their vanity and panders pleasantly to their self-esteem. Special arrangements are made for them. And each may blow his own trumpet confident that his efforts will be supported by blasts from the masked chauffeurs of the management, and cheers from the claque. Everything possible is done to keep the Jews in the masque, apart from other people, submissive to the will of the international directors, and enthusiastically working for the greater glory of the showmen who use them. They like to tell and be told of the lofty idealism, of the spirituality, and of the uniqueness of the Jews, and to pretend that the outstanding personalities of all time from Adam and Noah to Columbus and many of the Spanish inquisitors were Jews, even if they did not know it, laughing out loud, to say nothing of the red rulers of latter-day Russia since 1917. When it is pretended, for instance, that the Jews are an unique and exceedingly ancient race, and that they are the originators and sole possessors of unique and original traditions, writings, customs, rites, laws, and religious tenets, peculiar to themselves alone, and different from and superior to those of all other peoples. Investigation is invited and, when undertaken, at once exposes the hollowness and effrontery of the pretense. If the Jews were ever a nation with a language and traditions of their own, the place where that nation lived, in ancient times, has yet to be discovered. Written 1936. Palestine was never in the possession of the Jews. They were never masters of even the country west of the Jordan, nor of the sea coast. Many Phoenicians and other Canaanitish cities were impregnable to Jewish strategy. The Jews occupied portions of the country only, and even these they had to share with the Canaanites. The sanctuaries of Palestine, such as Bethel, Beersheba, Gezer, Jerusalem, Bechem, etc., were not Jewish holy places, but ancient sanctuaries of the Canaanites adopted as such, by the Jews, who, in most cases, adopted also the hero of the place. Among the heroes thus adopted by the Jews were, Terah, the deer god, Ram, the god of darkness, Abram, the begetting or father god of the dark heights. Here then follows a long list of pagan idols that mysteriously match many biblical heroes and places. A few choice ones here included Esau, the goat god, Joseph, the divining and interpreting god of the ancient Canaanites, Israel, the Phoenician Saturn, to whom children were sacrificed. Lot, the concealing or veiling incense god, Moab, the rain god, father of waters, Saul, the Babylonian sun god, who came to Palestine, the land of the sons of the ass, to find his father's asses. This is serious, don't laugh. And many others such as Ishmael, Isaac, Leah, Rebekah, Deborah, and Samson. The list is long. Having adopted what they did not understand, the Jews became muddled, not only with regard to heroes, but also in connection with customs, histories, beliefs, and sites. Thus the Jews do not know the real site of Mount Zion, nor, apparently, why they are unable to identify it. Sinai is not the mountain of Jehovah, but, as its name implies, of the Babylonish moon god Sin, Lord of Law, and, especially, Lord of Hosts, whose territory, also, is the desert or wilderness of Sin, and whose worship dates from at least 4200 BC. Jewish identity was only molded around 450 BC. Jerusalem is, as its name implies, the city of Uru, the plague god, the war god. And Salem, the sun god, in his malevolent and destructive role as god of the dead and lord of hell. The Jews pretend that Jerusalem dates from the time of David, but it has yet to be proved that there ever was a Jewish king David. Jerusalem possesses not a single relic of either David or Solomon, nor of the temple which it is pretended Solomon, the wise fish god of the Assyrians, built on the sun rock there. Jerusalem was not built by the Jews, the city and its name Jerusalem were in use long before the Jews adopted them. Sargon of Akkad incorporated Palestine in his empire about 2800 BC, and from the 23rd century BC to the 15th, Palestine was under Babylonian sovereignty. It was paying tribute to Babylon about 1780 BC. From 2200 BC to after 1400 BC, Palestine, thus, remained under the influence of Babylonian culture and Babylonian literature. From the 15th century BC to the 10th, Palestine was a province of Egypt. And after the 10th century BC, Palestine was a vassal of Assyria until 608 BC. The rule of Egyptian king, Ramses II extended for more than 100 miles beyond Jerusalem. And Ramses III records that about 1275 BC, he pursued his enemies as far as Aleppo and Carchemish. Ramses, father and son do not mention any such people as the Jews, who still have to explain when and where their alleged exodus took place. Talmud claims 600,000 Jews escaped Ramses in the heroic Red Sea parting story. Such an exodus would leave a massive trail of campsites, rubbish tips, cemeteries, artifacts. None has ever been found. It's pure fraud. There were never, of course, at any time really 12 tribes of Jews. The phrase the 12 tribes of Israel has the same significance as the phrase the 12 labors of Hercules. The only subdivisions of the Jews which have been traced with any degree of certainty are a group called the Sons of the Jackass, Hammer, and a post-exilic clan called Bani Parash, the Sons of the Flea. Serious history this is. These two Jewish factions, although each was distracted with internal dissensions, were continually bickering and quarreling with each other and with their neighbors, so that Tiglath-Pileser III found it necessary to deal with both. In 738 BC he levied tribute on the larger faction, and in 732 BC he received homage and tribute from the smaller. Being utterly unreliable and untrustworthy, these people were constantly giving trouble, and about 726 BC Shalmaneser IV had to take punitive measures against the larger group, again. The Jews avoided punishment by offerings of money and fair promises, but it became evident that they were all the time intriguing with his enemies. And Shalmaneser IV again invaded the country, and carried away the king into captivity. His troops remained in Palestine until, in 721 BC, his successor, Sargon II carried away both the golden calves and the 10 tribes, and together they vanished from the page of history. In the next 700 YRS numerous empire rulers invaded and occupied Palestine, and enslaved these Jewish groups because they could not rule themselves and forever conspired against their rulers. Only 43,000 Jews returned from Babylonian captivity. Meanwhile Jerusalem was still in ruins and the returned Jews refused to live in it. Now, however, they were forced to do so by their priests, who placed guards at the gates and locked in the unwilling citizens at night. Later these first Zionists were required to cooperate in certain crude restorations and rough building. Most of their clumsy efforts were soon swept away. But by 430 BC the Masque had been started and the adoption of holy places, heroes, traditions, and religious tenets proceeded apace. The immigrants had brought with them a muddled idea of the Babylonian calendar, the Babylonian system of numeration, weights, measures, and money, and also such scraps of mythology, ritual, sacred writings, and philosophy, etc., as they had been able to absorb or obtain. Thus history began to be fabricated and sacred writings to be adapted, and the result of these equivocal labors have come down to the present day. Of the history of the Jews during the 600 years following the fall of Babylon and their coming under the Persian rule, little reliable information is available. Their own highly colored stories of their spirituality, lofty idealism, patriotism, endurance, fearless valor, feats of arms, heroism, and nobility of character, etc., plentifully interspersed with miracles, are unsupported. None of their contemporaries seem to have been aware of the prodigy in their midst, nor even to have liked or respected the Jews. On the contrary, by the Assyrians and the Medes, the Jews were deemed the vilest of all peoples. And among the Greeks and the Romans they aroused dislike and contempt. Emperor Marcus Aurelius said he was sick of the filthy noisy Jews. No other history corroborates the Jewish tales, which are suspiciously like, and appear to have been formed in the same unscrupulous manner as those in the books of Joshua, Esther, Judith, Daniel, etc., which likewise were put together during this originating period of Zionism. Like the Greeks, the Romans soon discovered that the Jews were tiresome subjects. They created a community within a community, lived in a state of ceaseless friction with their non-Jewish neighbors, and were constantly lashing themselves into a frenzy over barbarous customs and ideas which appeared ridiculous to the practical Roman mind. Nevertheless, the Romans granted to the Jews many privileges and immunities, all of which the Jews abused. And from 63 BC until they were finally quelled by Hadrian in 135 AD. Except during the reign of Herod, the history of the Jews is mainly a record of rebellion against Roman rule. The practical common sense and easygoing tolerance of the Romans was hateful to the Jews, while, to the Romans, the Jews seemed a race of bigoted fanatics, whose dire and credulous superstition rendered them the implacable enemies, not only of the Roman government, but of all mankind. An unchanging characteristic of the Jews, too, has been their unfailing success in earning dislike of the peoples among whom they have settled. Sooner or later all these peoples have come to regard the Jews with extreme disfavor. So it was with the Assyrians, the Medes, and the Greeks, and so it was with the Romans. From the time of Ptolemy to the 3rd century AD, a great many Jews, chiefly those of Alexandria, devoted themselves to the extraordinary task of forging texts and other writings to support and strengthen the great Masque and Jewish pretensions. Detribalized Jews such as Philo, who frequently reached heights of which the rabbis of Palestine had never dreamed, and Josephus, who, according to his own writings, was a very resourceful and remarkable man, made propaganda openly and unashamed. But others, equally sly but less pert, adopted more insidious methods. These usually put forward their ideas under the cloak of some distinguished name. Thus, books were circulated bearing the names of mythical personages or of people who, although they were well known, had never written a line. Newly compiled literary productions were put forward as writings of the greatest antiquity. Verses were forged and philosophers had fathered upon them, writings which represented them as taking a profound interest in the Jewish scriptures. Poets were falsely represented as being deeply impressed by the Jewish religion. And oracles were deceitfully quoted as predicting a mighty destiny for the Jews. The pretensions of the Jews to an honorable and remote antiquity, for example, were ridiculed. For the Jews to pretend that the gifts of civilization were made through their instrumentality was, said the Greeks and the Romans, preposterous. What, it was asked, had the Jews done for art, literature, or science? Instead of being the teachers of Plato and the Greek philosophers as the Jews impudently pretended they had been, it was pointed out that the Jews were barbarians when Greek culture had arisen. And that of all the horde of small peoples, shifting from slavery in one country to servitude in another, the Jews were the least productive and the poorest in civilization. Meanwhile, the Jews dissimulated and secretly determined to make another attempt to exterminate their non-Jewish fellow citizens. In Cyrene the Jews massacred 220,000 Greek and Roman citizens, in Cyprus 240,000, and in Egypt a very great multitude. Wherever the Jews outnumbered the rest of the population and their uprising was successful, the Jews behaved in the most revolting manner. Many of their Gentile neighbors they sawed asunder, in emulation of their mythical King David. And they licked up and smeared themselves with the blood and devoured the flesh of their victims and twisted the entrails of the non-Jews about their bodies. After this exhibition of their spirituality the Jews were forbidden to set foot on the island of Cyprus, and Cyrene had to be recolonized. Fraudulent language claims. It is not known what language was spoken by the Jews in ancient times. The Jews like to pretend that the original speech of mankind was Hebrew, and that they originated it. But Hebrew is not even as old as Arabic, and it is not Jewish. Even the word Hebrew is not Jewish. Hebrew is a patois of the despised Canaanites. It is a mixture of fragments borrowed from all the languages spoken by the people with whom the Canaanites came in contact, expressed in an alphabet borrowed from the Phoenicians, about 800 BC. This alphabet and the Hebrew vocabulary are imperfect. Ancient Hebrew had neither vowels nor punctuation marks nor any division between words or between sentences. While some of its consonants are so like others, that mistakes in reading occur repeatedly. Indeed, it is authoritatively stated that some 800,000 various readings of the consonants in surviving manuscripts, which are not very old, have been counted. Copies vary so much, that it is impossible to say which is the correct version. Hebrew has been a dead language since the 4th century BC, so that on account of the imperfections of its written form, no one knows how it should be pronounced. Since, however, it has been resuscitated and become part of the Masque, the Jews are tinkering at it, and no doubt, in time, when vowels and a sufficiency of artificial words have been added, it may become almost as useful as the Pidgin German, known as Yiddish, which is spoken by most Jews today. 1936. For centuries the Jews of Palestine spoke Aramaic. And both the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmuds are written in a mixture of Aramaic and Hebrew. Many Jews, apparently, were unable to understand even this mixture, and so translations and explanations, called targums, were made for the more ignorant Jews, who seem always to have found language difficult. Notwithstanding this difficulty of language, it is pretended that the Jews are the originators and possessors of an unique literature of inestimable antiquity, all literature which is a vast storehouse of knowledge, science, law, poetry, history, and religion, and which is without an equal among the literatures of the world. Upon examination, however, these claims are found to be exaggerated. The Jewish writings are not unique, except in this, that they do not present a single original feature. The language employed, the style, mode of presentation, many of the phrases, similes, sentences, and even whole portions of works, may be shown to have been adopted from the writings of the Babylonians and other peoples. For instance, just as the 23rd Psalm may be shown to have originated in Babylonia, so many verses of the 104th Psalm are almost word for word the same as those of one of the hymns written by Akhenaten, who reigned over Egypt from 1385 to 1375 BC. Now get this, gang. Hallelujah is placed at the beginning and end of many psalms in exactly the same way as the ancient Greeks used to place Alleluia at the beginning and end of the much older hymns to Apollo. Nor are the Jewish writings old. The Jews, if there were any then, did not possess the art of writing before, at the earliest, 900 BC. Hence no Jewish document can be much older than 800 BC. That is to say, more than 4,000 years after the deeply religious psalms of the earlier Akkadians had been written, the Jews were learning to write. The Jews possess no original documents of any kind whatsoever. The seeker after these is patiently reminded that the originals, including the Decalogue and the Targums of Onkelos and Jonathan, all of which were traced by the finger of the God of the Jews, were all destroyed when Jerusalem was sacked. It is explained, however, that this makes no difference worth mentioning, since they were all completely restored, about 149 years afterwards, by a priest called Esra or Esdras, about 444 BC. So much for the antiquity of the Jewish culture and sacred writings, laughing out loud. Stay tuned for Part 2, History of the Jews in Modern Times. This is a summary of a free PDF download booklet, The Jewish Masque, a very informative quick read. Link below this video.